Hello, and welcome to Finlandia Foundation in Conversation. I'm your host, Maria Voltaine, for the second episode of this monthly podcast where we talk with interesting Finns and Finnish Americans. In today's episode, we talk with Eric Saarinen, son of Eero Saarinen, who's known for the Gateway Arch in St. Louis and Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C., among other things. He's also considered one of the fathers of mid-century modern architecture. Eric's grandfather, Eliel Saarinen, is one of the pioneers in Art Nouveau architecture and is known in Finland for designing the Helsinki railway station, and here in the U.S., for example, for the Cranbrook Academy of Art in Michigan. Eric himself is a filmmaker and has created a film about his father Eero, the architect who saw the future, as part of the PBS American Masters series, and is currently working on a film about his grandfather. He joins us, quite fittingly, from Cranbrook. Welcome, Eric. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Maria. It's nice to be here.
I'd like to start with just the very basics. Where were you born, and a little bit about your background and family?
I was born in Harper Hospital in Detroit, Michigan, to my mother, Lily Swan, what was her maiden name, and Saarinen, and then my father, Eero Saarinen. He was from Finland, and I've always been interested in the Finnish connection. Growing up, I was brought up in Cranbrook School, which was designed by my grandfather. And for me, I had no idea that it was designed by him. I just knew that that's where they lived, Eliel and Maya. And so being young, I didn't have too much to do with the adults, but I had a lot to do with the nature around there. And I like to walk and watch the geese and watch the squirrels and watch the birds and look at the trees and the flowers. And it was actually exquisite landscaping. And I didn't realize Eliel had designed it. So I remember coming around the corner one time, one of these buildings, and seeing that there's a male discus thrower trying to, in the act of throwing. Who were these people that created this beautiful kind of nirvana or Elysian fields so many years ago, so long before I was born? That was my impression. It was a timeless place, and it was anywhere you went was just one. It was like a magical mystery tour for me.
So how did you finally figure out that Cranbrook was a family creation?
I don't think I ever really did. I mean, it was kind of it was in my genes too. It's kind of later on. I was in Finland and looking at another Eliel design, and the person who was proudly opened the door said, "Do you feel Eliel here?" And I said, "Yes, I do." But to me, there was always Eliel in Cranbrook. It was more instinctive that those shapes and the forms and the kind of compositional sympathy and empathy with the landscape. It was really his philosophy that allowed him to find those forms to meld into the landscape. And so for me, it was very natural for me to love it, which I did.
So how did your life evolve away from Cranbrook?
Basically, when I was 12, my mother and father divorced, and my sister and I and my mother moved to Cambridge, Massachusetts. And then Eliel died in 1950. And so I knew Eliel up until 12. And then, of course, he was gone. And then my father, I knew until I was 19. And then he passed away really quickly. So my mother and father and sister and I moved to Cambridge, Massachusetts. I gradually grew up. Went to prep school in the East, which was horrible. And then I realized I had to go to college, and I found some college that was interesting that it turned out to be very wide open in the sense that you plan your own courses. And it was only later that I realized that was Eliel's philosophy, that nobody wanted to be at the end of a big hall with a professor at the other end of the hall and telling everybody what to do. Having been brought up in a very artistic family who always promoted the idea that you can do anything you want, I felt that I could do anything I want. And, they could draw, they could paint, they could take photographs, they could make movies, they could, so I felt as if, I was enabled that way, that you can teach yourself. And if you find something you like to do, I realized it had to have something to do with art, and it had to be fun. And so my search really from the time that I left working at my father's office and then he passed away was really a really strict search for what I wanted to do, and which ended up in being filmmaking. It wasn't in my blood to be an architect, but I loved film. And then I traveled around. I was in at the Louvre in Paris and looking at the Mona Lisa, and I knew it was a famous painting, and I knew I should really sit down and look at it for a while. And then I searched to see if her eyes followed me wherever I went, all the classic things they say about that portrait. But I realized it wasn't as good a medium as film, because, a couple minutes and I'm gone. Even though it's one of the most famous paintings in the world, it doesn't really hold my attention for more than 5 minutes at the most. Whereas with a movie, you have people sometimes for 90 minutes in the dark, and you can really make a statement. So I felt it was a modern format relatively to Eliel being born in 1873, before they made movies. My dad working with Charles Eames, a little film for him, which sold the idea of the Mobile Lounge at Dulles Airport in a 6-minute film. They came up with millions of dollars to do that. So my father sort of honored Eames in the sense that he could, that's a really good sales tool. My evolution as a filmmaker is sort of like now I'm back at Cranbrook. Now I'm doing film on my grandfather. Now I've done the one on my father, which all the fingers pointed toward my grandfather, because my father never could have done what the body of work he did in 10 years without knowing what the philosophy is, knowing how to go about it, growing up with his dad.
Really had here an opportunity to create an environment. It was of all the buildings, all the landscaping, everything together. Here was the technical center for a great metal producing corporation that mass produces precision metal. Somehow the character of that should get into the architecture. These very stairways, like this one, is really a piece of sculpture in itself. We have to remember that architecture is not just here to give space and shelter for man, but architecture also has the purpose of marking and enhancing man's time on earth.
That's interesting. Although Eliel is generally less well-known than Eero, I think. Although in Finland, everyone knows Eliel Saarinen's work, whether they realize it or not. We have an Eliel Plaza there, and if nothing else, we all know the Helsinki railway station. How did that train station come about?
The story was he was a hot architect. He and his band of two brothers, the three, Cheselius, Lindberg, and Saarinen, were, GLS, and they were hot new architects, very young, and they really took on the task of creating a difference between the national identity of Finland and the national identity of Russia. And he, as a 17-year-old, he was out in Ingari looking up folk objects and folk art and trying to establish what Finland did as, in their own personal interest that they cared about, which was basically nature. One of the setbacks was when he did the National Museum. Everybody loved it. That was after he used the beautiful paintings that Galan Kalala did for the Finnish pavilion in 1900 in Paris. He used some of those for the National Museum, and the bears were there, and they were the same bears that were in Paris in 1900. So then he won the competition for the railway station. So he got the prize money, but then he was confronted with all the major architects of Finland at the time, and they were saying this is rational. It's supposed to be rational. It's not no more squirrels, no more animals. This is the machine age, and he was mocked in newspapers with cartoons and things like that. So rather than fight, he did one very cool thing, which he had the prize money. He and Loya had just gotten married, and they decided to go on a honeymoon / railway station tour. And they went across Scotland and England and Europe. They went to Germany and Switzerland and Austria, France, and basically came back, spent the money. In other words, they spent the money on the railway tour on their honeymoon. And then he came back, rolled up his sleeves, and worked for 3 more years and came up with a brand new railway station that didn't look like anything. And if you were going to try and compare it with anything, it might be something like Mayan architecture. So he certainly didn't find that in Germany. But what he did learn is a little bit about railway stations themselves and what some of the structures are necessary, because they're such a big part of every town. The engines and the tracks and things like that take miles to set everything up. It's not just building a building, it's town planning now. So it really didn't get finished until about 1919. And, because the war came and First World War, and I think there was there also a rebellion,
Civil War.
Civil War, right? The Civil War. So war became one of his problems, and basically he ended up saying, "I hate politics," because what politics sometimes led to war, and he didn't. He wanted, lots of things that he had won. City planning, town planning, huge, big visionary things never got done because of war got in the way. But this railway station certainly got done, and it's certainly relevant today. And I'm glad the people of Finland recognize it for what it is and restored it to what it should be.
Actually, at that railway station, those statue men that hold up those lamps, they're actually extremely current and always at the cusp of whatever is going on in culture or society. I was actually in Finland last summer, and of course it's been a COVID year, and I took a selfie in front of the station because the guys were wearing masks. I thought that was so funny and clever. And I saw stories about this in the media outside of Finland too. So
it's in magazines all over the world now, because it's so relevant.
Yeah, they're famous.
So timeless and so relevant at the same time.
Exactly. But I have many, many memories from that railway station. I lived in Finland during my teenage years and early adulthood. And I have run through that station more times than I can count. Always try to catch the last train out. It's such a part of everyday life out there. But you've worked in Finland yourself. What's some of the work that you've done there?
So I was lucky to have already done a commercial in Finland for Lapinkulta beer, the original Lapinkulta beer, and was up in north in
Lapland. I'm from there.
You're from there?
Close to the Lapinkulta brewery, actually. Although I think they closed it down. But yeah, Lapland's gold is what that means, Lapinkulta. But sorry to interrupt. Please continue.
So we were in Kilpisjärvi. The nice thing was that the sun never went down. It was during melt off. So during midsummer. So we had magic light all day long, and it's the only time I've ever been able to call lunch, or they have lunch called, and an hour later come back and the clouds are still gold, and like pastel colored skies, and just really beautiful. Hadn't changed. It's like magic hour all day long. So you can't go wrong. And we won a Clio for cinematography because every shot is beautiful because it was beautiful, So then I was lucky enough to be in on this pitch for the railway station. And my producer, Pepe, said there's only one person that should do this commercial. And it was me because Elio had designed the station. So that was great. I don't know. Next thing I found myself in a sauna with a bunch of people I never met, which is what happens, I guess, when you get a job in Finland.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But how did you end up in commercials? There's so many different directions a career in film can take. And I know you've worked on feature films as well. So what was your path?
Yeah, it was a good path. I mean, not having come from an easy place to follow. In other words, it was a very difficult path I had been handed. I had to do something, and it had to be good, and I had to care about it, had to really put my heart into it. And so I went to film school, and I went to UCLA graduate school in film, and then I got out and made a few art films, directed and produced a few art films, and lost money in every one of them. So I realized maybe I'll buy a camera and I'll learn from other directors, rather than telling everybody what to do. Maybe I should, be a little bit, back off a little bit. And so I did that. And so I worked with a lot of people, a lot of directors. And then I as a cameraman, and then I became a director of photography, was doing low budget Roger Corman features, did the Hills Have Eyes, the first Hills Have Eyes, did a bunch of, horror films and edgy, and learned how to do a shot in 5 minutes if you have to, no matter what it is. And then I sort of gradually worked into features and ended up doing major features, including Albert Brooks's Lost in America. But I also worked on Gimme Shelter. I also worked on, I shot Jimi Hendrix. I did a lot of music video films in the old days with the Bee Gees and with, pretty much everyone. But I had a camera reel, a cameraman's reel, and it was in a production company that did commercials. They liked what the images were. So they said, director cameraman, Eric Saarinen. They called me and they said, do you want to be a director? And it was for the San Diego Zoo, so it's animals. So I didn't have to worry about people. People are a little more complicated, you have to, animals are pretty much, they're easier to figure out in a way. I said, well, what does it pay? And they said twice as much. And I said, okay. So then basically that's the first commercial I did. It won a whole bunch of awards. And then I had done something for Disney, which for Epcot Center, which I think 22 million people had seen. And that was 65 millimeter. We went around the world 2.5 times. It was a to die for job as a camera person. And somebody had seen that, a producer for commercials, and said they wanted to speak to me, So that became the beginning of Plum Productions. I was a full partner. He was the strategy guy. He did the money part. I didn't have to. All I had to do is my thing. And we were very successful for 28 years. And, it was a heyday. But, in the long run, that was practice. Those commercials were practice for doing the film on my father. Because I'm just doing I've realized I'm just doing commercials of my father's work. I wanted to put the audience in the shoes of somebody who went through there. And I wanted to also capture his buildings so that it could be projected in the future, not just for television now, but it'll last digitally. So we shot in very high resolution, much higher. We shot in 6K. This is, in 2015.
So tell us about how you found yourself making a film about your father. My understanding is that you didn't want to do it at first. So it's interesting how that all ended up working out in the end.
Well, I wanted to do, first of all, I wanted to direct it. I was a director cameraman. I considered myself a director cameraman, and somebody else wanted me to shoot it. And I said, can I be like, can we co-direct it? And he said, no, this is for the Directors Guild. So I said, I'm in the Directors Guild. So he said, well, but we're not the Coen brothers. Those are the only people that can do it together, something like that. So fine. So Peter Rosen directed the film. But as far as the work that my father did, I was picking the shots, and I did the shot list, and I, controlled the day when we were doing his work. So, and then I had my crew, and we, he stayed back and allowed me to do that. So it's kind of like the way he just told me recently that the way he saw it was that this is a film about my father through my eyes. So if it's through my eyes, we're actually seeing the work too through my eyes. So he didn't interfere with that. So it worked. But the best part of that was the fact that I didn't want to do a film about my father because I hated him, because he ruined our family. I lost all my friends. I had to move to another strict school. I moved to Cambridge, but my mother was, the new wife, and Aline and my father wanted me to get away from my mother because she was kind of negative to us. She wasn't helping us that much as children growing up. So we went to prep school. Susie and I both went to different prep schools, and so he had just abandoned us basically. But I worked at the office for a couple years in a row, 3 years in a row. I didn't know this, but turns out that he wanted me to be an architect. But I learned that it had to be something that was fun for more than 8 hours a day, like 16 hours a day. And filmmaking was fun 16 hours a day. So anyway, so back to my father not want to work with him. Then I suddenly realized that if somebody's going to shoot a film about my father's work, and I'm not going to do it, who's going to do it? They're going to screw it up. there's nobody that would throw themselves into this thing more than I would, because I'm trying to, I could never prove to my father that I was anything better than a gas station attendant, but and then he died. So it was kind of I was left not really with no no goodbye. It was just like, in fact, it was worse than that. I went there. He was going to tell me that he had cancer and he couldn't do it. So they put me back on the plane. And then I got a phone call. And then I had to tell.
So he never told you that he's dying from cancer? Ah, wow, that's rough.
But the fact is, so here is something that I could do, because what he said in no uncertain terms that what he really wanted to do is have a piece of architectural history in the future. And so it occurred to me that maybe I could help with that. So, talk about Sisu. I mean, I was very, very strict because it was my father's legacy. It wasn't me, it was my father's. And it was everything I could do for him. So I learned to put what I never thought might happen was that I would forgive him. But as I worked through his process and read the love letters between Aline and him, and also letters to his shrink, his down-to-earth thoughts, how he felt about everything, it made sense. And I could see it from I find now that if you put yourself in somebody else's shoes, you can really accept a lot. If you don't try, you sort of lose out by having that other knowledge that you could gain. So to me, it was a very cathartic, and that was there went my shame right out the window. I didn't, I had, it's something I could have done for my dad, and I did do it. So I'm proud of it, and I'm proud of him.
I think it's such a beautiful story how it all came together. And for you to find that healing and to see things from your father's perspective too, I think many of us can learn and relate to that human aspect in it all. We actually got a copy of the DVD from Peter Rosen because Finlandia Foundation National proudly gave a grant for this project. I was always very excited that we got to participate in this small way. So I've seen the film and think it's really great work. And I think that it's really wonderful how throughout all this, you've also found your own legacy. Because when you come from such greatness, sometimes people struggle to find their own place and voice. But you found a way to do that. And then at the same time, honor your father and grandfather and their legacies as well. I think it's a beautiful thing.
The fact that I could do something for him meant so much to me, because I realized that not only could I understand him and his work, I could do in high resolution. I could do it for the future. It can be in the National Archives. It's much more useful than just, being in a television film that is about me and through my point of view. But really it's a way of capturing my father's work in a way that couldn't have been done at the time he passed away. So it meant a lot to me. It meant a lot to his legacy. And I think the most important thing was that in studying him and reading all those books, I realized that my father couldn't have done in 10 years the body of his work without the absolute perfect philosophy of art and architecture, which was that you have to think forward. You can't think back. He realized never to copy anyone, especially yourself. Not all artists have style, but the artists that really last are the artists that don't stick with one style.
And the work has lived on, truly. It's interesting. Even the TWA terminal has been turned into a hotel. Even if things happen. And in this case, the airline isn't even in existence anymore. Yet the building still looks fresh and unbelievably cool. It's so unique. So, you sharing this philosophy explains it. You never repeat yourself or copy yourself. And now you have this body of work that is all exceptional, masterpieces each and every time. And so it lives on. And especially these days, everything seems to be so cookie cutter, copy
Yeah.
paste. Everything looks similar and in other art forms too. Pop music, of course, and even in film, there tends to be a formula that is followed. So, how do you avoid repeating yourself?
You can't, you just have to keep going. Norman Rockwell, weirdly, as an artist, he stayed very contemporary with the new, everything that came out, everything that was contemporary that year with the, what is the Saturday Evening Post. He put the womb chair in these drawings, and he put the new pop art, all the new fads were in there, along with just regular people, and it's not just Victorian, it's the ones that keep pushing the envelope and trying things, that keep the struggle, keep trying to create. If it's no longer creative, it's no longer fun. If it's no longer fun, you might as well be doing something else.
Most artists can definitely relate to that. It's a very artist way of thinking.
Yeah.
So now you're working on the film about Eliel. Yeah. Where are you at with that? Is it a similar style of storytelling and production as was the one about your father? Tell us a little more about the Eliel movie.
Eliel being Eliel, I think to tell the story in several layers is the way to do it. I know that he's written a lot, and for example, his book about form, he talks about going back and thinking about his early childhood, and he sort of makes fun of himself, and he's got that Nordic sense of humor, absurd sense of humor, which is just wonderful, by the way. And so I mean, I have to look at the guy. I have to think, okay, I'll tell you about Eliel, and then you have to come away with the fact that here's a really, really sensitive person who loves nature, who studies nature, who I don't think he ever really copied nature, but he learned to learn from nature. Example of some great designer, whether we could call that God, or we could call that art, or we could call it Mother Nature, or we could call it whatever we want, but there's an extreme intelligence in it. And so the solutions there's nothing boring about the solutions. I mean, I could go on and on and on about even in our own bodies, intelligence that's unconscious to us. Its ability to heal a bone, its ability to heal an artery, its ability to heal the head or the heart or the leg or joint or whatever. It knows how to heal itself better than we know, even now. So something comes along, okay, something else comes along, okay, this is contemporary, or this is Deco, or this is Gothic, but nature is nature. Nature, there's something nice about a tree, something nice about the shade of a tree, or the smell of a tree, or the bark of a tree, or all those kind of tactile or things that we're comfortable with and have in our so many generations behind us felt the same way about wood, about the strength of wood, and about the ability of a tree to change and get out of the shade of another tree, for example. There's some greater force that we have to look at, that, like, I don't know, are you musical at all?
Oh yeah. My whole life before doing this, I was a musician, recording artist.
Singer?
Uh-huh.
Okay, great. Well, so do you play a little piano?
Yeah,
Okay, so do you play any by ear?
sometimes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'm just getting at the fact that sometimes it flows
Yeah.
through you. Sometimes you're a medium for something greater that you can never copy again, and you could never. And I'm just speaking for myself. I don't know if I'm speaking for every musician, but I feel like I'm a passerby. I'm waiting for the electricity to come, and it comes once in a while. It comes and it flows through me. It's just I'm a medium for it, and it's a wonderful feeling. The same thing with the shot. Same thing with just finding a shot in nature. It's like you see the composition just falls into place. I mean, you search and you search and you search, and then it's like, or nature comes along. You're trying to second guess the sun or the moon or the clouds or something like that, and nature comes along and does something completely different, and it makes it so much better and unplannable.
No, I can definitely relate. Sometimes when I've been performing, something else has been coming through. You can tell. It's not that you're doing it yourself. And then there's other times when it's not as magical, but on those other times you just know.
you know, and
Yeah.
you just try and stay with it, stay with the ride.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's so great when that happens. So when do you think this film is going to be ready?
We're in the money raising, you know, wonderful time of life right now, but but I feel really good about the people we have. Some people that's what they do, and I feel very good about them. I feel very good about going to Finland. I went to Finland twice this year so far, and but basically the story about AO is more like a movie and less like a documentary. It's more like from his point of view. He was extremely funny and extremely smart and there are so many stories about him that there are these Voipio brothers that are, I don't know, somehow we're related, and they know stories that I don't know. Like they know about him and his volumes, 270 volumes of Finnish folk art that he went on and dug up. They also know, shared this, the boat trip. There was a boat, he was in a boat with about 12 other people. They told me exactly what the names of all the people were, who they were, architects and artists and wives, and it was they were rafting some river, and it was I think it was in August, and the boat hit a rock, flipped over, and two people died, and Elio almost died, and he was underwater thinking he was going to die.
When was this?
1920s. And there are newspaper articles about it. You don't have to go from chronologically at all, but it's those kinds of things that those kinds of the layer of his consciousness, the layer of my father's consciousness, the layer of the war, the history, all the things that are happening, and also the wives and the relationships and the communal spirit, and then the travel to the United States being a completely separate second half of Elio's life as expressed by Alvar Aalto, saying that the first half was his finished part where is in his experimental laboratory. The second half is him carrying it out in the United States. Not to say that he didn't, because he was doing city planning, in 1910. This Canberra city plan was unbelievably big-minded. He's planning things for 50, 75, 100 years out. He did Helsinki for 50, 75, and 100 years out. He was designing in Helsinki. He was designing the width of the roads to be 75 feet, or however many meters that is. Then he did one for Detroit, and he did one for Chicago waterfront. So, and they tried to peddle the Chicago thing to Henry Ford, but Henry Ford didn't pay any attention. So, and that's just when he came across. It's 1923. So then he got hooked up with Cranbrook based on the drawings he did for the Detroit riverfront. He was teaching at University of Michigan, and he had his students doing drawings with him. George Booth, who financed Cranbrook. His son was learning architecture under Eliel. So they took Eliel's drawings up to George Booth, and that became Cranbrook. So his ultimate city plan was Cranbrook. I guess the question is, what did we learn from Eliel? And I think the main thing is that we learned that we're supposed to do things ourselves. He said something like a true work of art has got to leave, you have to leave a part of the artist in any work of art to really call it a work of art. Otherwise, it's just plagiarism. When you learn how to dig this stuff out of yourself, no matter what format it is, no matter what kind of art form, or even it could be finance, or it could be engineering, or it could be anything, and social. And he also felt that life, work, and art were all one thing. You can't really separate them.
So if anyone is interested in donating, I will leave a link in the description if you want to be a part of this film coming to life. I'm also including some clips from the trailer, and you can actually see what's already been done. So where could people see The Architect Who Saw the Future about Eero Saarinen? Where's that available?
That's the title of it. And it's on Amazon. And you can also there's a trailer on my website, which is SaarinenFoundation.org. And it also has some other work that I've done. And it also talks about the Eliel film. It has, but the main contact for the Eliel film for donations would be info@artimpactconnect.com.
I'll leave a link where people can just click on and go donate to help see this come to life. Well, I wish you all the best and much continued success with this and everything else that you're doing. So thank you so much, Eric, for taking the time to talk with me today.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
And let me know what I can do for you.
Okay, I will.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Well, that's it, folks. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Finlandia Foundation in Conversation. I hope you really enjoyed this talk. I certainly did, and learned quite a bit about the Saarinens. If you wish to learn more about them, you can visit SaarinenFoundation.org. There's also many links and stories about them online, and you can go down the Google rabbit hole for hours on end if you want to learn more about this industrious family. And of course, please donate to the film about Eliel Saarinen as well. If you wish to learn more about Finlandia Foundation National, please visit our website, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and join our social media. We have a lot going on. But for now, this concludes this episode. Please join me again when we come back with our next guest. Until then,